welcome folks to another edition of the Growth Leader series here at AirOps. We've brought some amazing guests over the last few weeks and months, and then we'll have another one for you today. Today's content focuses on scaling growth with founder-led content. But what I'll say is the principles that you'll see will present are kind of applicable to thought leadership content or any sort of content you want to create. So I feel like we're in for a good one today, having seen the slides. And then just quickly going over the agenda on the next slide. We'll obviously meet Will, learn a little bit more about his background and what he's up to at Catalyst. And then we'll kind of check through these items of how to maintain authenticity at scale. I love Will's kind of process around turning interviews into content. Something we try and do internally, but I've learned a lot from him in preparation of these slides. And then we'll finish off, as always, with tips and tricks on best practices and how to get started. Between all of that, we will also have Will demo what he's built on AirOps and how he's using the platform today. But if at any time you have any questions, we should have the Q&A section enabled below. Drop in questions and we'll try and keep this conversational as possible. So moving into our guest, I'm delighted to welcome Will Leatherman to the Growth Leader series. I've known Will just the last couple of weeks as we've helped him build out some of his workflows, and he's helped Matt internally with his LinkedIn content. It's been a pleasure to collaborate with them. And I was telling Will earlier, I went through his LinkedIn profile. He's a man of many talents, from the creative side to CMO to content. So I feel like he's a unique style of builder that's on AirOps, where he has the right mental model of what he wants the output to look like. He has great taste and knows what good content looks like. And he's able as well to hack away himself on figuring out what are the best inputs and how to stitch everything together. So Will, I'll let you add a bit more of a formal introduction to yourself and your background, but yeah, welcome to the call.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Yeah, I mean, we were chatting before, my background's a little all over the place. Definitely started from a more creative side of things, but now that I'm more in the tech world, I think there's a lot of advantages to that, especially in the world of content. Just understanding kind of what performs well, but pairing that with the analytical side of what's performing and why, to kind of make some decisions. Background, I spent most of the last few years in the Web3 space. Very interesting creative space, honestly, because it's so the Wild West. But then really started honing in the last few years on what content looks like for the B2B landscape moving forward. I just think fundamentally people are engaging with content in a different way than they ever have, and so we've been really focused in on that. Right now, founder profiles that can be the actual founders or executives or even sales teams. We're seeing huge success across the board, creating consistent, high quality content, for all those individuals, because the buyer process has evolved, and just a post from the company account isn't going to cut it anymore. People are self-educating through content, which honestly, I think is kind of a good sign, for salespeople. So that's what we focus at Catalyst. We've to date, worked with a little bit more than 120 executives at this point, really working across different industries. So, we focus a lot on fintech and Web3, a lot of, kind of infrastructure, enterprise-sized clients. But we also have worked with, more, kind of consumer-facing SaaS platforms, as well as, we work with some beauty founders and beverage founders as well. We really are seeing this type of content be effective across all different industries, with very minor changes on how we approach it, and which we'll get into. A lot of it comes from, our framework of how we actually come up with what we want to talk about and how we get that information out of the team that we're working with. You can see some of the companies we've worked with here. Again, a lot of this focus is a lot on, emerging tech, fintech, Web3. All of these seem to have very similar kind of proof points of how content can be used. I think one of my, in addition to the very ROI pipeline focused clients that we work with, working with VCs has been super interesting. We've helped different VCs raise funds through content, which was one of those that I wasn't really sure how successful it'd be. But really just kind of goes to show that no matter what industry you're in, content can be a huge unlock for you. And hopefully we give some guidance here today on how to do it effectively. So getting into it, just kind of high level, the way that we approach creating content is this, founder interview to high converting content framework. As soon as you start having multiple founders or multiple people you're creating content for, traditional in-house marketers or content marketers really had the brand to focus on of what's the brand's tone of voice, what's their perspective, how do we write content under the brand tone? All still very important. But once you include, multiple founders from, different backgrounds, someone more technical, someone more brand focused, you have to start interpreting and defining what those, kind of unique voices sound like. And the way that we, started solving this was through interviews and really, what's the most efficient way to collect information from someone to then put it into a content strategy to maintain that authenticity and make sure that we're accurately representing them as an individual if we're posting on their behalf. So we realized that these interviews are hugely important. In addition to all of the company data, case studies, sales decks, customer interviews, all of that information. And we knew that we needed a massive knowledge base that can be referenced. And one of the many things that initially attracted me to the AirOps platform was their ability to build brand kits, but then they also contextualize searches through their knowledge base. Because once you have a lot of data and a lot of information, how do you keep track of it? How do you organize it? How do you reference it when you need to? And so for us, the AirOps knowledge base was a huge component to our process. So those first two pieces, are, kind of the foundation of our process. And then content frameworks, there's so many different ways to tell a story. That's all content is, storytelling. And different platforms have different preferred methods of storytelling. And, for the content frameworks, we have just collected over, the length of time we've been doing this, that, what those frameworks look like that are effective for LinkedIn. We write for Twitter, newsletters, blogs as well. We have different frameworks for those, but you have to play to the platform a little bit. And so for us, we just have this knowledge base, again, another knowledge base of content frameworks for each platform. And then when, another thing that AI is really good at, and AirOps in particular, is consolidating all of that information we just talked about into a really detailed brief. AI is not at the point that it can fully write, for some things. But what we found is if we can give our writers a very, very detailed brief with all the information they need to write the most effective post, then they're set up for the most success. It also reduces their amount of time they need to spend thinking through each post. All of these things combined give us this kind of scalable content engine, very repeatable, very streamlined, leverages AI where AI can be most effective, but also uses humans from the interview and the actual writing to kind of maintain that authenticity. Here's a very quick example of what one of these briefs look like. So you can see this is a post of mine that I guess went out about a month ago. Did pretty well. Very happy with the performance of this. The things you don't see are the profile growth, the follower connection requests, the leads that have come through it. And this is the post, or this is the brief on the left here, that the actual brief that came out of the AirOps system that we handed off to our copywriters to produce. So you can see we have the hook recommendations. We know what kind of frameworks we're using for both the hook and the post. We know the quote we're referencing from the interview. We know the structure of the post. And then, some content formatting, which LinkedIn, relies on as well.
So one real quick there, you were able to load things like a preferred content structure or multiple content structures like into AirOps and then have the workflow work off of that.
Exactly. So in our, here in this content frameworks, essentially what we've done is we've collected a bunch of posts that have performed well, and then we reverse engineer them into structures. So, opening statement, we call that a hook. But then, actually detailed of how that post is structured. The same way you create an outline for a long form blog, we create outlines for our LinkedIn posts. It's really no different. And there are, tried and tested storytelling frameworks that have existed for, years that we're, just kind of building off of.
Yeah, that's great.
And then, if you're still kind of not sold on the power of content and specifically founder-led content, just some things that, we find that our clients really are most focused on when working with them. Obviously, impressions, follower growth, super important. You want to get, a wide reach. You want to own that distribution. You want to be able to, anytime you post in the future, know that you're going to reach those followers. Obviously, all this leads to the idea of deal flow. And so we want to make sure that we're actually using this content to close deals. And then for internal teams, what we see often is, they're wanting to reduce their production time. They might have the foundation of a content engine and they're looking to scale it without just onboarding a bunch of new full-time employees. Or they're spending way too much time on it, or the founder is even worse, and we want to save time for them. And that really just comes from simple process, the system that we walked through before, of using AI for efficiency, making those detailed briefs, posting consistently, and then making sure we're tracking performance of everything. Pretty easy framework there. So for us, the foundation was there, but the big question that a lot of people have in the content world is, especially if you're ghostwriting or writing on someone's behalf, is how do you maintain that authenticity? How do we keep AI from hallucinating? How do we make sure that our data is accurate? And how do we actually represent these executives as best as possible? From all of those things, the main kind of pain points or challenges that we found people face are not enough hours in the day for either the founder, if you're bootstrapped or early stage, there's still not enough time in the day if you're the one marketing hire, or even, have a full marketing team. When you're producing 200, 300, 400 pieces of content a month, which, everyone wants just more and more, you need efficient ways to scale. Can't scale anything without a system. So, we find that there's a lot of process problems, not being able to do things efficiently and make the best use of everyone's time. There's this kind of preconceived notion that with scale, you sacrifice quality. And, I think there's obviously some truth to that. But when you build these kind of robust systems and processes where you really can focus and leverage AI for the things that it's good at, not relying on it 100%, then you're able to kind of maintain that quality and that human touch to each piece of content. And then the most, disconcerting, challenge that I see a lot is a lot of people have tried, and because they're inconsistent or just aren't doing it properly, they kind of lose motivation pretty quickly without seeing results. And it just, it kind of makes you want to give up on the whole process, which is, obviously not effective.
Two questions came up, Will. One related to like time constraints you mentioned there for like founders, but Zach's question was around how long are copywriters taking to write the post based on the brief that's given?
Good question. Ideally, we're creating those briefs robust enough that they can sit down and just, write through a piece. Obviously, as they've been writing for an individual for more time, they kind of know, the tone of voice better. They know the company better. If I had to put a number on it, I would probably estimate like 30 minutes per post.
Nice. And then almost like a follow-on question from that, are there parts of what we'll say a writer gains from working with the founder over time that you try and turn into other content that then ends up in the knowledge base? So is there stuff that you're like continually trying to almost automate out of that process that maybe helps the second draft or the third draft of content for that team look incrementally like better?
Yeah, I mean, I think with AI as a whole, like the more feedback, the more suggestions, the more you can show it the way, the better it becomes over time. And that also goes to like the more knowledge, the more data you give it, the better it is. And so, if we're, our editors, if they're consistently seeing the same feedback from, the client, or, if you just are running into the same issue, you want to make a rule about that and give it back to the knowledge base. So you kind of eliminate that on that first draft. So, the more information and the more feedback you can give it, the better.
Yeah. We have another question that came in from Hans about just how CEOs are thinking about quality content and like kind of what that means with AI workflows. And I'm sure you're going to address that here as well.
Yeah, actually, perfect segue into to this next slide. So happy to dive in if there's more specifics. But generally, when we, obviously, it's a very common objection we hear, from the founder or the CEO, how are you going to represent my voice and my perspectives as best as possible? And that's why we always start with an interview. So when we start to write content, we are not writing anything that hasn't actually been said by that individual or that founder. That is how we maintain the authenticity. However, it's not always the most natural for founders and CEOs to be able to speak the things that we actually need them to kind of make effective content. So we know what's going to create good content. And when we are building out our interviews, we're crafting questions to kind of guide the founders or the CEOs to talk about the things that we need them to. If you sit down at an interview and you just go like, what do you think about, the current market conditions, or, what trends are you seeing? It's very open-ended. Things can come out of that at a spontaneity. But if you really only have an hour of someone's time, there are very clear things that we need, information, data we need to create the high quality content. And so that's why, the first thing that we did with AirOps was automating our, from onboarding, collecting all that information from clients to crafting the interview questions, because that is such a labor intensive time for us manually. And it is pretty formulaic at a certain point. So from an authenticity standpoint, like we're only creating content around things that have actually been said by the founders that we're interviewing.
And what kind of questions usually work best in those situations?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a few different kind of like foundational principles to interviewing. I do have a slide on that later, which I can kind of get into, more focused, like how we approach it. But we cover different topics, different themes. Those broadly are like social proof, customer success, testimonials, industry knowledge, personal backgrounds, and then also industry trends and market insights. And those are kind of the core buckets. We don't write the content of like, what your weekend routine is, or, those kind of things that teeter into a little bit too much personal life. We want to focus more on, business and, the company.
Thanks.
So generally the approach is, leverage real insights and real data from the individual that we're writing for, use AI to assist. So great for research, combing through that, 80-page report to pull out questions, those kinds of things. and use it for, formatting and research. And then, a lot of it is the relationship that, our human on the teams has with the founder and the company. Knowing, having that gut check is always important. If, you're not an agency and you're doing this, at an internal company, that's usually the head of marketing who can kind of give it that gut check in between, the AI automation and the founder. Our monthly process, I touched on this a little bit, but we start with research and the data that we have available. This includes interviews to really prepare what that strategy is and our approach. Again, we go into that interview with a pretty good idea of what we want to talk about and what questions we want to ask. We obviously leave a little bit of room for free-flowing conversation, but we found just the more structured you can be, the better output. Then, our a human writer, strategist, content lead takes that content and starts on production. We have a multi-step process of making sure that the content's authentic and accurate. Then we handle all distribution for our clients, and then we're using learnings from lead gen or how a pipeline has been affected to optimize. So if you get on a call with someone, we want to know what 4 LinkedIn posts and 2 blog posts they engaged with before that call. We're able to see all that, and then if they close to be a client, we want to look back and say, okay, we should write more LinkedIn posts on those topics or in that style. We should make more blog posts under that. So it's very data driven. So for quality control, it's super important again for that interview to be super conversational. Getting those specific examples from the founder, saying like a client accomplished this is one thing, but understanding what that process was like, what those things were, what hurdles they had to overcome. All of that makes for great content. A lot of individuals also have a lot of unique insights that they think are commonly known, but being able to extract those. And then we were kind of joking before, like I record everything in my life at this point, but really record everything. You never know when it's going to be helpful. Again, those knowledge bases are fantastic for, we've been doing content with a client for 6 months. Maybe we want to reference a quote from that first month interview for an upcoming piece of content. It really allows you to pull on older data that could still be relevant or used. Validation, always have a cross-reference, with the knowledge base, making sure that data is accurate. Those briefs really become, our North Star of like what content should turn into. Having someone who can speak the technical accuracy, and then, doing that kind of gut check of is the voice authentic and, maintain accuracy with the client. And then we have our, kind of review system that we use. Again, this kind of speaks to that multi-touch point to make sure that we're maintaining that quality. So let's get into the actual system. So we talk, I've talked a lot about like how we're balancing AI and using AirOps. This kind of demonstrates where in the process each one of these things come in. So for AirOps, we're using it for knowledge bases, as I've said. That's interviews, documentation, past posts, really anything we can get access to. We build really in-depth knowledge bases, building briefs from the themes that we've identified, industry research using things like Perplexity to find trending topics. There's a bunch of other options at this point as well. We can add in additional material. And then, we use that to prepare the interview questions. Once the interview is conducted, which is obviously done by a human, we use AirOps to process the interview transcripts and build those detailed content briefs and make sure that we have, again, there's multiple different ways to tell the same story. So we want to test different approaches to telling a story. One could be more case study format, which is very data driven, analytical. One could be more storytelling, using, kind of a personal narrative. And then all of that gets handed off to our writing team, where a human is actually writing, from those briefs. And this is where we get all of the, kind of voice accuracy, validating from the technical team, and then getting, that final approval from the founder. To Josh, to your question earlier about how we conduct interviews, we actually have, kind of developed our own playbook. There is a book in psychology. It's a psychology tech book, actually, about how to run effective executive interviews. Very relevant. And so using AI, we are able to synthesize that entire textbook and build our own framework of how to conduct impactful interviews. I actually just did a post about this today on LinkedIn. So if you want it, let me know. But essentially is a 6-step guide on like how we conduct interviews with examples of different types of questions. But the key is building trust with someone. Like, you got to build that rapport. If you're in sales, the importance of this, especially at the beginning of a sales call. You want to be able to just like kind of speak freely. But then a lot of it comes down to like follow-up and probing questions. Can you give me a specific example of that? Or, if they mention something, asking them to dive deeper into that. Asking them to tell about their emotions. I think that's one thing that a lot of people overlook in interviews is like, we accomplished this, and asking like, how'd you feel when you did that? Did you call anyone? Like, asking those kind of questions to get the human side of the content out there. Obviously metrics are super helpful as well. But when you kind of use knowledge bases to build an interview structure, you should be able to ask like, I call them like layer 2 or layer 3 questions versus just that surface layer question, because a lot of those can be just answered from a quick query search.
And how quickly, or how are you measuring success for your clients as far as when could they start seeing some results? And that goes to your question, Bernardo.
Yeah, it's like the $1 billion question. Depends on so many factors. Obviously, some clients we work with already have 50,000 followers on LinkedIn, so we can put up a post and it does pretty well. There are some people who have never posted on LinkedIn before, and we post something, maybe it does really well on the first go, maybe it doesn't, and that's okay. The time to see results is a little bit tricky. We say like 3 months, you should start seeing a positive ROI, if you do this consistently. And it also comes down to like how well you're tracking everything. I think that is another major pain point in the content industry is, attribution tracking is always challenging. And so, we try to solve that we've built, a custom tracking tool that monitors someone's touch points across LinkedIn, website, and then, CRM. But it's not perfect and it never will be. But, especially as privacy is always a concern. So, long-winded way of saying, really results are variable based off of kind of what's been established already. But a pretty good, within 3 to 6 months, you should definitely be seeing something to indicate whether or not you should be doing this or not.
Yeah, that's a good framework. Thanks.
Yeah. So yeah, before I jump in, we are writing some content for Matt at AirOps, which is awesome, super fun. It's allowed me to learn a lot about AirOps too. This is a post really from 2 days ago that started to kind of get some traction as well, which is awesome to see. And this is the specific brief. I went into the dashboard and found this brief that we put together before writing this post. So, I think the overall takeaway here is like use AI to consolidate information and get it all in one place to then use, a writer or someone whose specialty is in copywriting to then kind of take it that last final percentage.
I've seen this brief before, and what I really like is the key interview quote, because it shows that you've done the work, and then you also found like the key quote, and that's just automatically in the brief, from what I understand, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
That, you know, to us, like, obviously back to the authenticity thing, like we don't really talk about anything that you didn't actually talk about. So it kind of draws the parallel between, you know, what we want this post to be and what that, you know, the person we're interviewing, what they actually said.
yeah, it's amazing.
All right. I've been yapping a lot. Would love to actually start showing you guys the workflow that we put together. So let me just move myself out of the way. So this is the main grid that we use for our clients. You can see that we use a different sheet for each individual client. We have some just dummy data in here. But essentially the way that we run this workflow is in two different phases. So we have, you know, the initial input data where we are loading in what month we're creating content for, who we're creating content for. This is a simple dropdown. This is just a little bookkeeping step that we have here. One of the main concerns that we were trying to figure out how to solve was if we do, you know, 7 interviews, by that 8th interview, how do we make sure that we're not repeating any questions? How do we make sure that we're not just kind of recycling or, you know, regurgitating old content? So we've added these kind of like date stamps to go back and reference past interviews, past content to make sure that things are always fresh. Once we have this, I have this first kind of mega workflow, which actually I think I have. I think I have it loaded here, which you can see is pretty, you know, pretty robust. I'll kind of go into the individual steps here. But essentially this whole step is understanding who we're writing content for. We have a brand kit built out in AirOps, as well as having a knowledge base for the individual. So you can see, you know, we have Adam Healy, and it's referencing his name, the company he works at, in his bio. This is kind of a fail safe down here. But first, what we're looking at is relevant sales calls. So there's a lot of good information and knowledge that comes from sales calls. So we make sure that we're, you know, kind of referencing that. This is really just a formatting step, and looking to see if we've done any interviews, and then start to build out, you know, that interview outline. We have a format that we like to follow. We then are searching between 2 different databases of post examples and content examples. Might be helpful to actually show what these interviews look like as well. Once the output is here. But you can see we format it between main question with additional follow-ups. And so in here, we're referencing, like I said, those post frameworks that we've collected over time to understand kind of like what we're actually trying to ask and what will lead to those effective pieces of content. So we have a file, you know, we reference called viral top of funnel. This is really great for, you know, posts that you just want to be shared to a wide audience. And then we actually have our different themes that we reference as well. I think I can. I don't think that. This may be a better way to see the steps. So yeah, we're looking at past interviews. Yeah, going through those additional knowledge base reads. So the viral top of funnels, the themes and examples. These are the content themes or buckets that we are that are guiding our strategy with this client. And then building off of the content strategy that we've already created for the client. For one of the themes about industry news, we've added in a perplexity search where we're using that to then find any relevant news or information in the brief, which I'll show you. Under the, just back here, under this business goal, we have a section for like additional resources. And so we add in, relevant news or statistics that might, play into this post there. That's been a game changer of using AirOps. And then interview draft. So then we want to create a, that outline for what that interview is. And then, we have a later step where we add that interview outline to the knowledge base. That helps us eliminate, repeating questions in the future. So in additional steps, we'll make sure we're checking to see that we're not repeating any questions. This is what our content lead gets. So they get a list of interview questions. You can see that, we're referencing specific things on their roadmap. We're referencing specific case studies. Uniswap and Wormhole is a client that they worked with. Asking for contrarian views, really kind of tailored to the individual, the company, referencing specific things. This is a good example of kind of what that initial interview would be. But over time, they just kind of get deeper and deeper with questions.
I really like this because I think so many writers and marketers focus on just the AI content and just like the generation part. And what we're seeing here is like a real system of doing research, deep diving, like using Perplexity, using all these other research tools to then surface super relevant interview questions that just take out like so much of the steps. And then you have your writer or your interviewer review these questions. It's not just like AI feeding these to your subject, but then the human can review this and then pick out like, oh yeah, this one's relevant, this one's not, this one's really good, and tailor the whole session with those questions. So much work is taken out.
Exactly. I think like so many, it's super exciting, right? Like when ChatGPT first came out, you like typed in like, give me this, and like it would appear, and it was really exciting, and it still is. But I've found the more steps you can kind of break it down, we're seeing that now with like O1, I feel like, people started to get into like challenging the thought process of the LM. We kind of taken that approach where it's like, we won't just say like, write me a LinkedIn post. We've broken it down into the steps necessary and really tried to meticulously understand like, what are, step one is getting that information of like what we're talking about. And, these questions help us extract that information in a way more systematized way, where then later, maybe at some point we can say, great, here's the brief, here's all the context, here's the interview, now write me a post. It's going to output something much more substantial than just going 0 to 1.
Yeah, for sure. I know we have some questions that have come up, but let's go ahead and finish this part and then we'll kind of hit those at the end.
Okay. So yeah, just kind of running through the last bit of this. So you conduct the interview and then feed back the transcript of the call. You can literally see we've pasted in right from our note taker, the entire transcript. And the final part of this is it's going to actually take all that information, synthesize it, and create post briefs under different content buckets. Again, you can see this is a pretty intricate workflow, especially when we get into the different content themes and buckets. But it's actually it looks pretty overwhelming. There's a lot of steps there. But just to kind of quickly run through, a lot of it is formatting when you kind of feed back a lot of the data, giving AI or giving the LLMs the best possibility way to actually understand that data, we found has been hugely important. And a lot of kind of QA checks. So we're extracting the information from that interview. we're looking at those templates again, understanding where the templates fit into now that the interview's been conducted. We also want to know how many posts we need, right? Like, what's the deliverables here? Do we need 5 briefs? Do we need 40? We have a step for blog topics as well. So there's kind of a good foundation there. And then we do kind of a knowledge-based search again, look through case studies, see what's available to us. And then the output is we write these briefs to a grid. So you can see we now have these fully flushed out briefs for individual posts with all the same things we saw before. And let me go into theme 5, because this is where it's cool, where you can actually start to see the perplexity search added to these as well for additional research. And so again, for one LinkedIn post, that will probably be less words than this brief. We're giving our writers a whole lot of context into what they need to do to create this effective post.
We're having some people ask questions about if AirOps is writing the content or if you're having writers. How do you kind of navigate that?
Yeah. So the AirOps is writing everything you see here. But what we do is we then give this to our copywriter and our content lead, who the content lead's responsible for strategy and knowing the client. And the copywriter is in charge of taking this brief and now turning this into a LinkedIn post, not using AI. So they're the writing experts. We just want to give them all the information they need to actually then go write the post or write the piece of content.
Yeah, and just to be clear, AirOps does offer some text generation capabilities, but what you're seeing here is just a whole breadth of what you can do with AirOps, from like research workflows all the way through, and then you can kind of decide if you want AI to come up with a draft for you or not. Is really how I like to look at it, is if you want a draft or just have a writer go with it.
Yeah, some people work better off of editing something that's already in front of you. We've found that writing a post from a brief is better than trying to rewrite a draft, but it's really personal preference at a certain point. I know, I want to make sure there's time for questions. And I think we have a couple more slides, but I'm happy to dive into any kind of additional steps if people want more clarity on what we've built here.
Yeah, sure. Well, go ahead and do this one.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Wait, was there a question, Josh?
Well, a few people have questions about just like recommended frequency on founder post. And then also one around how long did it take you to assemble the AirOps workflows?
So I can get into frequency. I have this rapid fire LinkedIn content hacks, which I can throw in frequency here. I thought this might be a crowd pleaser, but to actually build the workflows, it's a little bit hard to say because we were kind of thinking through the process as we were building it. If we had mapped out what we were actually trying to do and the flow start to finish and then build, it would have taken substantially less time. So maybe, use what I showed here today as like a starting point. But I'd say if we were to do it again and we mapped it out properly, could probably build that whole flow in AirOps in like a week. It just really depends how much time you're dedicating to it. The nice kind of reminder is once you build it once, it's supposed to be autonomous or, at least take a lot of the manual lifting off. So it's worth that kind of upfront investment time.
And then also, do you have any recommendations for interviewing founders in a remote environment?
Yeah, great question. All of our interviews are done over Zoom or Riverside. So, doing it remote, you can definitely still kind of get that same kind of quality. We view it as a benefit because we record every session and then we can actually cut those into social clips as well. So you can get short form video content out of it as well. I think the main piece of advice I'd give in that setting is make sure you're doing enough like kind of rapport building at the beginning, especially if it's the first time you're meeting them. Don't just sit down and say, hey, great, tell me about, this example of, a client you helped 2 years ago. It'll end up being very transactional. You want to have a conversation with them. I did put this on, this is kind of like a, if I were to do it again slide, because I got excited and I saw all the cool things I could do with AirOps, and I wanted to build the behemoth of a workflow, and it turned out successfully, but I kind of wish I was like focused in on individual tasks a little bit more. So focus on one or two things and like kind of get a hang of it before you start building big. I kind of wish I, built a series of smaller processes. And so, probably my advice to you, maybe building that just like interview question flow first would have been a good place to start. But yeah, as for posting, we recommend a minimum. The main thing is like the more content you get out there, the more data you'll have, the better decisions you'll be able to make, the sooner you'll know if it's working or not, what's working. So, but I get that's, intimidating to go from not posting at all to 4 or 5 times a week for a founder. We recommend at least 3. 4 has kind of been the sweet spot we've found. That kind of balances, not overwhelming, but still being able to get data back to know, what's working, what's not. Biggest advice, collect posts you like. Like if you are someone who scrolls LinkedIn, if you like a post, made you feel a certain way, compelled to comment, angry, happy, those emotions, just add it to a database. Like save that for later. You can figure out how to use that information later, but like it's very valuable. One of the biggest things that I talk to founders a lot is the difference of writing thought leadership for your peers, investors, is very different type of content than writing for your customer. If you want to use content to drive your business forward and get sales, you probably aren't writing content for your peers or investors. You are writing content for your customer, which a lot of times will be oversimplified. If you're in the tech world, it can feel very, I think the most common thing I hear from a lot of founders is like, everyone knows this already, or like, I feel silly explaining what this concept is because everyone in my industry knows what this is. But if your customer doesn't, then it is still valuable. Go for it, Josh.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure we got to this question because I thought it was really valuable. Speaking of like founder content and topics, like how do you balance what the marketing team is doing for these companies versus maybe what the founders are doing as far as like social posts on company pages versus like founder posts?
Yeah, we view what we do as kind of a separate entity. So we are not, look, kind of cut it however way. Just the way that we're working with clients is they usually have a marketing team that is handling, product announcements, updates, all the other marketing material that needs to go out. We sit somewhere in between support on the marketing team because we do create content that's obviously driving marketing for the business, a little bit of PR for the founder. Some people view us as that. And then we're, because we also write for sales teams, we're helping the sales team with leads and kind of lead gen as well. So we kind of sit in between, but, some clients super early stage are using us as their entire marketing function because that's just, very cost effective. But then for more later stage companies that have a marketing department, we're just a very nice add-on to that system.
Nice.
3 here for hacks. First 2 lines are so important. Everyone knows the hook is so important. I don't know how much I can stress this, but if you don't hook someone, they're not going to give you their attention. Especially in tech, people love data. If you can add statistics, numbers, highly recommend. There's a book that I reference often called Making Numbers Count. It is a great way to talk about data in a compelling way. And we use that a lot for writing our content. Again, this is kind of the trove of social media, but don't just show your wins and successes. People like the whole idea of founder-led content initially started out of just like, being relatable, talking about the things that aren't easy, making those decisions. The thought process behind making decisions are always very compelling. Replying to comments early, some people call this like warming up the algorithm. But just making sure that your account isn't cold and you go on for 10 minutes a day, post something, and then close out of the application. They know if you're using the platform or not. And you want to spark conversation from your content. So actually replying to comments, going and engaging with other people's stuff is always beneficial. This kind of goes back to point 2, but like be specific. Like if you sit in sales calls all day and you get the same question from your prospects all the time, like go create a lot of content about that. Notice how I said a lot of content about it. Don't just create one post about it. Go create a lot of content about that. Because if 5 people that sit on calls with you have the same problem, it's really safe to assume that in your ICP, a lot of other people have that same question. Send connection requests. This kind of goes back to point 7. But like, if you want to reach, B2B marketing sales leaders, go send connections to those prospects. If Owen and I connect on LinkedIn, Owen's going to see my content for the next like week or so. Because LinkedIn says, oh, look, here's a new connection. Let's show what each other is doing. So it's a great way to kind of hack your content in front of the right people. Track profile views. Don't just look at individual post impressions. If you can track like, oh, I posted this on Monday and my profile views went up 15% on Monday. That's a good indication that like that's content that will drive people to your profile. And then, my favorite one to tell people is the customer conversations, sales calls, the conversations you're having with existing customers, feed that into your AI model of choice, ask it to come up with content ideas from that. Use your best intuition on which ones are going to be successful or not. But there's just so much hidden material. We try to not create more work for ourselves. Like if you're sitting in calls all day already, use those calls to create content. Any questions that came through? Cool.
One person had a question about the book on interviews you mentioned.
Yeah. I can drop that in. Or you can send me an email or connect with me on LinkedIn, and I will, the guide is literally on my LinkedIn today. So yeah, just, for anyone here, I am happy to do one-on-one sessions with anyone who watched this. I think we can talk through like, what are your content core pillars? What does it look like to post content daily for you? Give you some direction of what those posts could be. Happy to offer, an hour-long session or whatever. If you scan this, you can book time with me. I don't even know how many people are in here, but I set it for 10, but I'm sure it'll fill up and, first come, first serve. So happy to do that with anyone here. Would love to kind of help you figure out content. And if I can give you pieces of my AirOps workflow, if you're an AirOps customer, I'm happy to do that as well.
Yeah, I threw a few slides in here at the end just to kind of like add some of the AirOps color behind the amazing demo that Will gave. So outside of maybe social workflows, which is what like Will demoed here, we work with a lot of like high quality content teams, like you'll see on the left. Generally, I think like Will, they follow a very methodical approach, which is determining their strategy, trying to like launch high impact plays, keeping their content optimized. So even we saw that in Will's, where for each subsequent interview set of questions he's preparing, he's referencing back, so there's no overlap. And then for a lot of other customers, they're using similar briefs to what Will did, baked in their data to actually generate like articles or other types of content. So generally the same principles of authentic content, bring your data, build a really good workflow, they stay true for all of those impressive logos you see there.
Yeah, highly recommend.
Yeah, and then last thing, again, you'll see Will's workflow was far more detailed and again, like thoughtful than just, I have a transcript, I put it into GPT, give me back a social post, please. There's like steps there of QA. There's steps to go to Perplexity to gain more knowledge. So on the left-hand side, you'll see like the workflow builder, and that's what Will brought us through. You can bring your brand information, other context, and then just like his grid, you can start to scale that as well. So be it a social workflow, social content workflow, or anything deeper like SEO or article content. Again, yeah, happy to walk people through it afterwards. If you go one more slide, Will, we have similarly 10 sessions. Usually they're booked up by this time in the webinar. But yeah, if folks want to connect with us afterwards, here it's a little bit focused on like SEO strategies. But again, we're happy to get folks set up with workflows for whatever content suits your business and your needs the best. Most of these companies here, like Toys R Us, are running PDP enrichment, so product detail pages. Other companies like Deepgram and Angie are doing programmatic SEO and thought leadership content. So again, QR code is there. Our email is team@airops.com. Yeah, get in touch and we'd love to help you out.
Highly recommend this. Yeah, any other questions? And I'll just leave this up if people want to connect.
If you have a minute, someone asked about scheduling like appropriate amount. They're saying it looks a little bit daunting to schedule after month 3. Do you block out every few days maybe to schedule? So any tips on like how to schedule out posts or cadence there?
Yeah, I mean, personally, and then like what we do for the agency. So like our agency runs a lot more methodically than me personally, which is kind of ironic. But we usually schedule in batches of like 2 weeks. So if there's 4 posts a week, scheduling 8 posts usually only takes, a few minutes on LinkedIn scheduler. I hear a lot of opposing opinions too about like scheduling tools affecting the algorithm. My whole thesis behind that is like can't game the algorithm, and I don't think platforms penalize you for using tools that they allow. If you have good content, it will be distributed effectively, and it will reach the right people. If you're worried about like time of day and like trying to like optimize really specific things like that, you're probably better off just trying again with better content.
Yeah, love that. That's good advice. What if we go ahead and end it right there? Thank you all for joining us today. Will's information is right there. AirOps information. You can follow us on LinkedIn. Me and Owen are on LinkedIn as well, so feel free to reach out. And yes, Will has strategy sessions. AirOps has strategy sessions as well. Thanks for a great time.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Owen, Josh, pleasure as always.
Likewise, Will. Thanks so much. Have a good day, everyone. We'll see you later.